Hey everyone! Ever find yourself scrolling when you should be hanging out with someone? Well, today we're going deep on phubbing, and yeah, that's a real word. It's basically snubbing someone by being on your phone, and get this, it might actually mess with our empathy.
Interesting, right.
We're looking at two studies from psychological reports. One's all about those who phub a lot. The other digs into those split-second choices to check our phones, even when we're with people.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. It's not even just about making the other person feel crummy. This is about what it does to the phubber themselves, you know?
Right. So the research actually defines phubbing as being on your phone or just totally preoccupied with it during like face-to-face time with someone, and it's like at the expense of actually talking to them.
Uh-huh.
And get this, a whopping 90% of people in this study admitted to using their phones during social interactions. That's huge.
90%. Wow, that's really something. It really shows how much phones have become a part of, well, how we socialize now.
For sure. So why is phubbing so common? Is it like just the whole tech addiction thing?
Yeah.
Are we all just chasing those little dopamine hits from every notification?
I mean, there's got to be more to it than that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's probably a bunch of things mixed together.
Okay.
Like, sure, the way smartphones are designed, they kind of make you addicted.
Mm-hmm.
Those notifications are like these little rewards, and you just keep wanting more.
Totally.
But then there's also like this pressure to always be connected to everything.
Right.
And it's like you're afraid to miss something, even when you're right there with someone.
That FOMO is so real.
Oh, yeah.
But how does all this phone stuff connect to empathy and those actions that, help other people? The researchers call it prosocial behavior, right?
Right. Well, the first study, it found a link between phubbing all the time and having lower self-control. And here's the thing. Lower self-control, it's tied to having less empathy and, in the end, being less likely to want to help other people.
Wait, so you're saying there's a connection between, like, always checking your phone and not being the kind of person who helps someone out?
Yeah, that's kind of what the research is showing. Think about it. When you're on your phone during a conversation, you're not using your brain to connect with the person in front of you.
Uh-huh.
You're basically trying to do two things at once. And that can really get in the way of you understanding and sharing their feelings.
Wow. So it's like our brains are too busy with all the tweets and TikToks to really be present with the actual human beings right there with us.
Exactly. And what's crazy is the second study found that just thinking about phubbing, even for a second, can make you have less empathy and be less likely to help others.
Really?
They had people read little stories about phubbing, just to kind of prime them to think about it.
So just thinking about it does something. It's not even the actual phubbing, but the thought itself can change how we act.
Exactly. It raises some big questions about what all this phone use is doing to us in the long run. Are we getting worse at connecting with people and caring about them?
Okay, I'm kind of freaked out now.
Yeah.
Let's dig into this whole self-control thing a bit more. The first study said self-control kind of explains the link between phubbing and empathy. But in the second study, which was about those quick moments of phubbing, self-control didn't seem as important. What's up with that?
Well, there's this idea called the strength model of self-control. Basically, it says self-control is like a muscle.
Okay.
Every time you don't check your phone,
Yeah.
you're making that muscle stronger.
Uh-huh.
If you keep giving in and checking it, you're making it weaker.
So phubbing all the time is like working out the wrong muscles, and then it's harder to resist checking your phone in the long run.
Exactly. And that might be why it's so hard to stop phubbing. It's not just about willpower. It's about like retraining that self-control muscle.
So if you struggle to put your phone down, you're not alone.
Nope.
It's a real challenge.
It is.
But what about the bigger picture? These studies were mostly about how individuals act. What happens when we look at like relationships, workplaces, society as a whole?
Yeah, that's the important question. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next.
All right, so we're back. And like you said, let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about how phubbing can make us less empathetic and like weaken our self-control. But how does all this actually play out in our lives, like in our relationships and at work?
Okay, well, imagine you're having dinner with some friends, right? And everyone's just glued to their phones.
Yeah.
Are those friendships really getting stronger?
Probably not.
Or are they like becoming more shallow?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
If we're always phubbing the people we care about, it's hard to imagine those relationships like really thriving.
Yeah, exactly. Phubbing can really mess up the foundation of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it, like giving and taking, gratitude, feeling like the other person really sees you and hears you, all that stuff.
Right.
Those are like the essential parts of a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And they all suffer when someone's always distracted by their phone.
So phubbing isn't just rude, it's actually bad for our relationships.
Yeah, that's what the research suggests.
Wow.
And the workplace isn't any different. Studies have shown that when, say, a boss phubs their employees, it can make people trust them less and be less satisfied with their jobs.
That makes sense. I mean, who wants to feel like their boss would rather scroll through Instagram than actually listen to them, you know?
Right. And it goes both ways. If employees are constantly phubbing each other, it can lead to less teamwork, less trust, and even fewer of those behind-the-scenes actions that help an organization do well. Researchers call them organizational citizenship behaviors.
Gotcha. So it's like phubbing creates this whole environment of like disengagement and distrust, which is definitely not good for getting things done or for morale.
Right. Now, if we go back to why people phub in the first place, the first study actually looked at that too. They found a connection between phubbing and stuff like nomophobia, which is the fear of being without your phone, and even like avoiding conflict.
Oh, interesting. So some people might be phubbing because they're like anxious about being disconnected, while others might be using their phone as a way to get out of like awkward social situations.
Exactly. And it all comes back to self-control or, well, not having enough of it. Our phones have basically become our way of coping with all the messy parts of interacting with people.
Man, that's kind of depressing, isn't it? All this technology that's supposed to connect us, and we're using it to disconnect from the people right in front of us.
It's like the big irony of our times. But there's still hope. Now that we know how bad it can be, we can start making better choices.
So what can we actually do about it? It feels like we're like fighting a losing battle against how appealing smartphones are.
Well, the first step is just being aware of it. Like, notice when you reach for your phone and ask yourself, do I really need this right now? Am I missing out on a real connection because of this?
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes just stopping to think about why we're phubbing can make a difference. Are we avoiding a tough conversation, or are we just like bored?
Exactly. And there are some practical things you can try too. Put your phone on silent, put it in your bag, or even make no phone zones with your friends or family.
I like that, setting some boundaries. It's not about like hating on technology. It's about using it in a way that makes our lives better, not worse.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to be more honest with people about how their phubbing makes us feel, you know?
Yeah. Talking about it openly is important. Let the people you care about know that you value being with them and that you want to be present when you're together.
It's all about getting back to those moments of real human connection. But let's be real, breaking any habit is tough. It
Yeah.
takes time and work. We all mess up sometimes.
Totally. Be kind to yourself, be happy about the little wins, and remember, every time you choose to connect with someone instead of your phone, you're making those empathy muscles stronger.
You know, this conversation has really been eye-opening. It's made me think differently about how I use my phone and how the people around me use theirs. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one thing that's been bugging me.
Go for it.
We've been talking about all the bad stuff about phubbing,
Uh-huh.
but are there any good things about it? Could there be times when using our phones during social situations isn't so bad?
That's a really interesting question, and I think it's worth exploring more. Maybe there are times when phones can actually help us connect.
Yeah, like what if someone's using their phone to look up something related to what you're talking about or
Yeah.
sharing photos that get everyone talking?
Exactly. Or for some people who get anxious in social situations, using their phone could be a way to feel more comfortable around other people.
Right.
It might be a crutch, but a helpful one in those cases.
That makes sense. It all depends on the situation, right?
Yeah.
And we can't forget that our phones are amazing tools for keeping in touch with people who are far away, being part of online communities, and getting information that can make our lives better.
It's all about finding that balance. Using our phones to make our social lives better, not worse.
You know, this whole thing about phubbing, it makes me think about other psychological ideas that might explain the link between phubbing and empathy even better. We've talked about the strength model of self-control, but there are other theories too.
Oh, this is getting good. What other theories are there?
Well, there's this interesting one called the ego depletion model.
Ego depletion. That sounds pretty intense.
It basically says that we only have so much self-control. Every time we fight a temptation, we use up some of that self-control.
Okay.
It's like willpower getting tired.
Ah, I see.
So if we're always using self-control to not check our phones, we might be less able to control our emotions and how we act in other areas of our lives, including how we interact with others.
Yeah, so we're too mentally drained to really get into the other person's feelings.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Are there any other ways to look at this?
There's another cool theory called attachment theory. It's all about the bonds we form with our caregivers when we're little and how those bonds affect our relationships later on.
Okay, attachment theory and phubbing. How are those two connected?
Well, think about the different ways people attach to others. Secure, anxious, avoidant. People with secure attachment, they're usually more comfortable with intimacy and being vulnerable.
Uh-huh.
They're more likely to want close connections with other people and to keep those connections strong.
But people with insecure attachment, they might struggle with that stuff.
Right. For example, someone with an anxious attachment style, they might be more likely to sub because they're afraid of being rejected or abandoned.
Yeah.
Their phone becomes like a shield to protect them from getting hurt.
And someone who's avoidant might use their phone to create distance, to avoid getting too close emotionally.
Exactly. So phubbing, it might not just be about being rude or having weak self-control. It could also be because of deeper emotional patterns and attachment styles.
Wow, this is giving us a whole new way to understand phubbing. It's not just about how individuals act, it's about technology, psychology, and our basic need to connect, all mixed together.
And that's why we have to be careful in understanding when we talk about this. Phubbing might be a sign of something bigger going on underneath.
Well said. This deep dive has really made me rethink my own phone habits and the habits of the people around me. But before we, completely untangle the whole psychology of phubbing, I think it's time to move on to the last part of our exploration.
Yeah, I agree. We've covered a lot, but there's still some really interesting stuff to talk about.
So stay with us, everyone. We're going to go even deeper into the world of phubbing and how it affects our social lives. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into, well, phubbing. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've gone from how it affects our empathy and self-control all the way to, attachment styles and stuff. But before we start calling ourselves the ultimate phubbing experts, we should probably talk about what the research doesn't tell us, the limitations and all that.
Right. Yeah. No research is perfect, is it?
Yeah.
It's always important to look at those limitations so we can, understand the results without getting ahead of ourselves.
So what are some of those caveats, those things we need to keep in mind?
Well, one thing is both of the studies we talked about used self-reported data. So basically, people had to tell the researchers about their own phubbing habits and how they felt about it.
Uh-huh.
And, well, people aren't always the best at judging themselves.
Yeah. It's like that saying, everyone thinks they're a good driver. We tend to see ourselves in a better light than maybe other people do.
Exactly. So there's always a chance of bias, right?
Mm.
People might not realize how much they phub others, or they might downplay how it affects people.
And the studies were also about what people intended to do, not what they actually did, right? So even though the results suggest phubbing might make us less likely to help others, we can't say for sure that it means people actually help less in real life.
Yeah, that's an important point.
Hmm.
I could have all the best intentions in the world to volunteer at a soup kitchen, but if I never actually go and do it, those intentions don't really matter.
Right, intentions are only part of the story. Actually doing something is a whole other thing. It would be cool to see research that looks at that,
Absolutely. Seeing how phubbing actually affects whether people help each other in real-life situations would be a great next step.
And another thing is, the studies were mostly done in Western cultures, those that are more individualistic. We can't just assume the results would be the same for people from other cultures.
That's super important. Culture shapes so much of how we interact with technology and each other,
Uh-huh.
It would be really interesting to see how phubbing works in collectivist cultures, where getting along as a group and depending on each other are really important.
It makes you wonder if the effects of phubbing are seen differently depending on the culture and its values.
Right. Absolutely. This research is a good start, but there are a lot of cultural differences to consider. And even within Western cultures, there are a lot of different social norms and ways people use technology.
It's a good reminder that human behavior is complicated. There's no single answer to why people phub.
Exactly. But even with these limitations, I think these studies give us a lot to think about.
Yeah, I agree. They've definitely made me more aware of my own phone habits and how they might be affecting the people around me.
Me too. And beyond all the research and theories, I think there's something really simple, but really important at the heart of this whole thing.
What's that?
It's that connection matters. We're social creatures. We need connection and belonging. And when we choose our phones over those connections, we're missing out on something really important for our well-being.
That's a great way to put it. It reminds us to put our phones down and really be present in the world, to enjoy those moments of genuine connection with people.
Exactly. The world is full of amazing things, and the best way to experience them is with our heads up, our hearts open, and our phones put away, at least for a little while.
Well said. And on that note, we want to encourage you to think about your own relationship with your phone. How could you change your habits to connect more deeply with the people you care about? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, take care, everyone.